Hello and welcome to the ultimate guide to engineering in Mordhau. In this guide I will go over everything you need to know about the engineer. From the basics like which structures can you build and how many of them can you build, to loadouts and also tips and tricks on how to play effectively. So if you want to be a really good engineer in Mordhau and you want to know which objects you have to place, where you have to place them, and also how you have to play in general, then this guide is perfect for you. And now let us start with the basics. If you want to call yourself an engineer, you need to have the toolbox in your loadout. With said toolbox you can place wooden spikes, a wooden wall, and also a mounted crossbow. Whenever you spawn, your toolbox has 5 out of 6 possible charges. Building wooden spikes or wooden walls will deplete 1 out of those charges, and building the mounted crossbow will deplete 6 charges. As you could see, spikes, walls and mounted crossbows build up themselves over time. But if you hit spikes or wooden walls, they build up faster, but this doesn't work with the mounted crossbow. The build time of the mounted crossbow is always 10 seconds. Wall spikes and also mounted crossbows can of course be damaged and destroyed. The damage will also be visible, so you know when you have to repair them. Which brings us to the next item you need to have in your loadout. You either need a mallet or a blacksmith hammer. But I will explain more about loadouts later in this guide. A really important thing to know as an engineer is that you can only place 6 walls or spikes combined. So in this example I placed 5 spikes and 1 wall. And now you can see that if I place additional objects, the first one that I placed will disappear. Another important thing is that you can only have 1 mounted crossbow placed at a time. You also have to know that walls can roughly take twice as much damage as spikes can. That's really important for you to know when making decisions on which objects you want to place in order to defend a capture point. You always have to keep in mind that 1 single firebomb can destroy a whole set of wooden spikes. And although it can be hilarious when you see your spikes working, in most cases it's better to build walls for defensive purposes. In the tips and tricks section of this guide, I will explain you which structures you should build in a more detailed way. And another thing you should know is that spikes can kill people and horses even when they are visibly damaged and don't look as sharp. And the last basic thing you need to know is that you of course can resupply the charges of your toolbox at the supply box every 30 seconds. And now that you know the most important information about the engineer, let's jump into loadouts. The Smith perk is extremely important for you as an engineer, and the perk is not negotiable. You really need this perk in order to be as effective as possible. For the head, you want medium armor, you want light armor for your torso and no armor for your legs. The medium helmet is extremely important for you as an engineer because a longbow won't be able to one-hit you anymore. This is extremely important for you because when you're at a mounted crossbow, for example, you're an easy target. And even if an archer hits your head now, you still have time to react. And wearing no armor for the legs is also okay because the only thing that can one-hit you if you don't account for horses or ballistas is the executioner's sword. In your first weapon slot you want to have the blacksmith hammer. It is roughly 10% faster when it comes to repairing than the mallet, and it also does roughly twice as much damage, so you can still defend yourself when you use the blacksmith hammer. And because you can defend yourself with the blacksmith hammer, you don't want to take another weapon in this loadout, which saves you some precious equipment points. And the toolbox, of course, is a no-brainer for you as an engineer. And now things will get a little bit more interesting. I chose the medic bag for my third weapon slot. One of the main problems when playing an engineer is that you fall back really far when it comes to score points. Even if you get a couple kills here and there with your blacksmith hammer or the mounted crossbow, and you build really well and repair the buildings and structures, you still have a really low ranking on the scoreboard which also hinders your progress when it comes to getting gold and experience after the match. That's the main reason why most people stop playing the engineer, even if it's fun. The medic bag solves this problem. Even as an engineer, you can be on top of the scoreboard now, because you're visiting supply boxes often and can resupply medic bags often, and every medic bag can give you a potential of 200 score points, because every usage by a teammate will grant you 50 score points and every medic bag can be used 4 times. Some of you hardcore engineers might say now, hey, I just want to build stuff, I don't want to heal people, I'm not a medic. But the thing is, when you keep your teammates around you alive, they will defend your structures and everything you've built will stay for a longer time. But if you don't care about score points and progression at all, you can also pick the firebomb because it's really versatile for you as an engineer. You can use the firebomb offensively or defensively, like in this example. 2 enemies were hitting this wall that I was trying to repair, and so I got them away from it with the firebomb, and I've even got one of them killed. But I personally would choose and recommend the medic bag. Another viable but also really situational choice that you can make is picking up the smoke bomb. If you're having a lot of trouble with people throwing fire at your structures, you definitely want to pick up the smoke bomb because smoke extinguishes fire. In this short clip you can see how effective smoke can be in order to save your structures from fire. And keep in mind that smoke bombs cost 1 equipment point less than medic bags and fire bombs, and that's the reason why you can pick a light leg armor for this loadout. So my recommendation would be to create 1 loadout with the medic bag in the 3rd slot and 1 loadout with the smoke bomb in the 3rd slot and a light leg armor. And now that you've learned about the basics and also the most effective loadouts, let's jump into the tips and tricks section of this guide. First of all, your main job as an engineer is of course to secure capture points, either offensively or defensively, like in this example. And now I will go over several tips in order to maximize your effectiveness while doing so. This first tip is also by far the most important tip, because most engineers that I saw did it completely wrong. Whenever you block off a choke point completely, your teammates won't be able to retreat when they are losing a fight. And that's the reason why you should in most cases leave a little bit of space open so your teammates can retreat, like in this example. This clip shows a situation where you actually want to block the choke point off completely. I see a lot of enemies heading to the capture point, so I decide to just block it off completely and buy my team some time. Some of the enemies just jumped around my structures, but I also managed to distract a couple of them, which led to us being able to defend the point. But this is one of the rare cases where you actually want to block it off completely. In this next clip, I see a lot of enemies heading to the capture point, but I decided to not block it off completely because I knew that my teammates are already coming. So, instead of blocking it off completely, I placed myself into the little space that I always leave open. This bought my teammates enough time to come to the point and defeat the enemies. This example shows that you can defend a point really well even if you leave a little bit of space open, because you always can place yourself into that space. Tip number 2 is to leave enough space between structures. You want to use as little resources as possible when you want to make a choke point tighter. I could make this choke point really small because I left enough space between my walls. So I only had to use 4 instead of 5, for example. And now I can still place 2 wooden spikes. Since you can only place 6 walls and spikes combined, you really want to use them wisely. Tip number 3 is to build the right structures. You really want to use walls and spikes correctly. As I already mentioned in this guide, walls have roughly twice as much HP as spikes. So if you really just want to make a choke point tighter, so that your enemies have a hard time coming through, you really want to place walls instead of spikes. Another good thing about walls is that the enemy archers will have a harder time hitting you. I personally use spikes mainly in two situations. The first situation is shown right here. I use the spikes for a place where my teammates probably won't ever retreat to, and I also secure the wall behind the spikes. The second possible situation where I use spikes is when I know that my teammates probably won't ever retreat to a capture point again because they are already attacking the next one. Then I will use a spike and put it into the empty space that I leave open, so that my teammates can still pass through it when they are respawning, but enemies, single enemies most of the time, won't be able to get on the capture point so easily. Tip number 4. Know when to build and use the mounted crossbow. Right before I built and used this mounted crossbow in this clip, I secured the capture point behind me. I maxed out on my structures because I built 6, I built 2 spikes and 4 walls, so I can't build anymore without some structure despawning. And now my teammates are pressuring the next capture point, and that's when I decided to build the mounted crossbow and support them. Also note that I press the H button so I can easily distinguish my teammates from the enemies. You should also keep in mind that you can use the mounted crossbows defensively as well. In this example we had 3 different mounted crossbows right on the capture point, and we made it really hard for the enemies to even reach us. There are a couple extremely good spots where you can place your mounted crossbow in order to be really effective. If you place your mounted crossbow here on Tiger, I guarantee that your enemies will hate you. They will hate you a lot. And this spot right here is also extremely powerful when you're coming from the red side, because you can kill a lot of enemies from here. And don't forget to press the H button so you can see who your teammates are and who aren't. Tip number 5. Pick the right time to fall back or advance. In this clip I could see that my teammates are losing the battle in the middle, so I decided to fall back and secure the capture point that the enemies are going to attack next. As an engineer, you always want to be one step ahead of the enemy. The next tip is to resupply frequently, especially when you're using the medic bag in your third weapon slot. You can resupply every 30 seconds and you should definitely do so, because every medic bag can give you up to 200 score points and you also support your teammates. Whenever you can resupply, there will be a small symbol above the supply box indicating that. And the last tip is to use the smoke bomb against fire. There will always be matches where a lot of enemies will use fire bombs to destroy your structures. If you notice that and you have a lot of trouble with the fire, pick the smoke loadout and extinguish the fire using the smoke bomb. A good side effect of the smoke bomb is that your enemies won't see you while you're repairing your structures. So that's the end of my guide. Now you should know every important aspect there is to engineering in Mordhau, and you should be able to play pretty effectively. But of course, practice makes perfect. So leave a like, subscribe to my channel if this video was useful, and then jump into the frontline game mode and practice. Thanks for watching.